In the conservation biogeography, we will be discussing that how we can tackle the problem of climate change in case of how we can predict that how the climate change is affecting the flora and fauna and the biodiversity of organism in a particular area. So the implication of changing climate are inherently complex to predict. So it's not very easy to completely assess that what are the effects of changing climate it has on a particular organism. There is an enormous challenge to biogeographer wishing to predict how individual organisms and ecosystem will respond. So far, most of the focus has been on answering two key questions. So there are two key questions which we will be discussing later, but the most the probable thing that the biogeographers can do is that how to assess the effect on the organism, that how it affects a particular organism, and then how it particularly affects the ecosystem. So at these two levels, and then there are the two questions which are here. So how will the current geographical range of species be affected under different climate change scenarios? So if the climate change becomes hot, how would this range of species will be affected? And if there are these geographical range has more temperature due to the global warming, how will it affect? How many species and which one will be unable to adjust their geographical range in alignment with changing climate and therefore become threatened with extinction? So adjusting the ranges is not a very easy thing. There is much more area on the tropics, and as we go away from the tropics, the area become lesser, more competition ensues, and the organisms may die due to the competition and due to the less resources that they will have once they have changed their ranges. So the two general approaches have emerged to address this question. One is the mechanistic model, and the other one is the species distribution models. So mechanistic models quantify the relationship between the key physiological and behavioral processes and the external environment. So the physiological or behavior processes, for example, what about the thermoregulation system of an organism and increase in the temperature in the outside environment? So this is a mechanistic model, and here there is more ample explanation of this model. All other things being equal, mechanistic models are more powerful since they tell you about the underlying processes driving patterns. They are more likely to work correctly when extrapolating beyond the observed condition, and this was told by the Bolker in 2008 in the Ecological Models and Data in the book, and this is at page 7. So the other model is the species distribution models. A more flexible and widely used method for forecasting climate-induced range changes the family of models known as species distribution models. So it is a family of models, and it tells us about the climate-induced range changes. These relate the presence or absence of a species to some aspects of the environment, typically a number of standard climate variables. A basic species distribution model has three components, and these three components are observed land use, observed species distribution, and observed climate. So first, these three combine to make a bioclimatic envelope, and then there is a climate model which combines with it to make a model range change. And now the input from this model range change comes from the climate model and dispersal model, and all of these are combining the information to give us or forecast the output range. And we can discuss the output range, that if the range is increasing, that will be increase in the species or the survival of the species, and if the range is lost, then the species will be lost. So these are the main steps in modeling the future distribution of species under climate change. So this was the approach taken in 2004 by the British biologist Chris Thomas and colleagues. Thomas' study, published in journal Nature, used as an SDM approach to model potential effects of global warming on the distribution ranges of 1103 species of strategically chosen land animals and plants. So these approaches are being used to predict or forecast the ranges of different species. So SDM has species distribution models, or SDMs, have been strongly criticized because of the wide number of assumption and uncertainty implicit in such complicated models. So there is a wide side of assumption and speculation, and there is much more uncertainty in this model, and these models are criticized for that.